Alright guys, I'm going to continue here and I'm going to add a second layer on our trees, and I'm going to make a bit more of a dark green, but this time I'm going to add more black. You could technically just use straight black if you wanted to because it's pretty dark. But I'm going to go with darker green. Do you see I did more black? It's still green, but it's very, very dark this time. Do you see? It's super dark green. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add um, like a little bit of a dark one. You could technically do the same thing, start by putting tree trunks and then turn them into trees, or you can just do a couple dabs on a lower area of all your trees. It's kind of hard to see because it's so dark on dark. You see, now you can see two dimensions. You can see this is darker and the edges are lighter. So basically this is why we're doing it on the first place. Just want to give it a bit of complexity and make it more than one dimensional. Right now I'm going to move on to my house, and I'm going to start by coloring in the actual house, and then I'm going to move on to the roof here. So for my actual house, you can use medium small brush or small brush, whatever works for you guys. So I'm going to start by just making brown. To make brown, I'm going to scoop some yellow and some red about equal parts on the side. Then I'm going to add just a little smidge of black. Now that I mixed my base brown, I'm going to take a little bit of that on the side, mix it with some white. And you can adjust it as needed. So in my case, this is a good color, but it kind of looks a little too pinkish for me. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and add it into it to adjust the shade of my color. So you see now it's like a nice light caramel color, which I think would be a really good fit. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to color in the house part. in this part too, right here. And you can color it in a little bit lower than what it should be, because we can always overlap the grass over it. And while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to move on to my road too. So I'm going to add a first layer onto my little path. Then while it's still wet, I'm just going to take a little bit of white. I'm going to add a touch of white here, touch of white here to blend them in a little bit. Then I'm going to move on to the roofs and I'm going to make that orangey color again. So I'm going to mix some yellow, some red, and some white to make that peachy, orangey, coral-ish color. And if you wanted to, you can add a smidge of brown, so just to bring it down and make it just a touch dimmer, so it's not so, vibrant orange. It's just a little bit slightly browner shade. Yeah, great. And then with this color, I'm going to color in my roof. All right, now you can use either a small brush for this or continue using the same brush. I'm going to adjust a couple smidges of this color onto my house. So I'm just going to add a couple of vertical brush strokes. So just to bring a little bit of that undertone into my house color. And if you wanted to, you can smudge some of it on the road too. Just a little bit, mostly like a dry brushing it on basically. Because you don't want a full-on brush stroke of that color. Just want like a little smidge. Alright, great. Now I'm going to use the same color and add it a little bit right here. While I still have it, I'm just going to go right here and add with vertical brush strokes and a medium brush. Just going to almost color in a section here, not a big section. So just a little section there. Now I'm going to switch my brush. I'm going to wash off this brush. And I'll put it aside, and I'm going to grab my small brush. I'm going to grab just a little bit of that brown paint. And now I'm going to start by adding the texture on my roof and on my building. It doesn't matter whether you start with the roof or with the building. So I'm going to start by adding a little bit of that brown here. And then I'm going to flick some down from it. And some of them are going to do more like a longer lines. Just make sure you use really fine brush here. Add a little bit of brown on the bottom here too. And then grab this brush at the same time. Take some brown and I'll color in my door. And then I'm gonna add some brown underneath here. And flick some brown from it. Alright, now I'm going to move on to my roof. I'm going to add a line here. And a smaller line right here. And a couple lines on an angle, just for the texture of the roof. And with this, I'm going to bring a couple brush strokes of brown down my road too. Just don't use too much paint on your brush. You want to always dry brush it on as well. It's nice and light. There's one more line in brown that I'm going to add, and it's going to be a line right here. Alright, I think it's good when it comes to my brown for this brush, so I'm going to move to this brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of brown in this corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding flicks from the road up. And maybe just a little bit of brown in this little corner too. Alright, moving forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to my base green using the same medium small brush, or at least that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to make my green. So I'm going to start by just making, I would say, pretty light green. So I'm going to take some yellow, a little bit of blue, definitely some white, mix it up, and you see it turn into a fairly light green, I would say. Now to this green, I'm going to add a little bit of red. Now it's unlikely color to add to green, but what it does makes it A, dimmer, and B, gives it this burned undertone, which is what we're after. Because it's fall, it's not a spring grass, it's not a summer grass, it's more like a fall grass, so it needs to have a bit of this burnt really undertone. So it needs to be a bit toned down. And now I'm just going to fill the rest of this with vertical brush strokes with this green. I'm going right over my fence. I don't want to avoid it. So when I get closer to my oranges here, I'm just going to overlap them. Using a little bit of paint, so don't use a whole bunch there because you still want to see some of your oranges peeking through. You see a little grassy texture here as well, overlapping trees and house. All right, on this section right here, I'm gonna fill in with the same color. I'm trying to make more of because I kind of underestimated how much I'll need and didn't make enough. I'm gonna make a little bit more of it. And as you can see, I'm overlapping my brown. And the last section right here, I'm going to fill with this color that's going to be so a bit of my brown. I'm going to mix it with some white. So you got a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to add a smidge of red and a smidge of yellow. So I'd say slightly orangier brown. And with this color, I'm going to fill in this section. And again, I'm going to overlap everything around it. So still vertical brush strokes because we do that for all our grass. You're going to overlap your bottom brown and you're going to overlap your green as well. Because you want to integrate and use, so where you're coloring in, when you're coloring in the areas that have just white canvas, definitely use a bit more paint. But when you're going over the areas that already have some paint, you can use way less, just so you can see through whatever is underneath it. And you can switch to a small brush if it's easier for you after you have finished coloring in just the areas that were completely white canvas. If it's easier for you to just integrate it as a brush strokes of this grass color, brush strokes of brown into the grass, you can switch to a small brush there. Alright, technically you can add this color anywhere else you want to, but I think I'm okay. I think I don't want to add it. Maybe like a touch here. Alright, so what we're gonna do now, we still have a couple more layers to add on to our barn, and we have lots more layers to add on our grass. So technically we could go either way. We could start working more on the grass, or we can start working on the barn. I'm leaning towards the grass probably, just because we're already on the grass. So we might as well continue. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add, so now you make different shades of green. So you have that base green that you used. Now you can make a slightly lighter shade, so grab a little bit of that, or make a whole new color just a little bit lighter this time. And with this lighter color, go ahead and flick in a couple section of a lighter green. Again, just use, I would say, medium or medium small brush, and just add a couple of vertical brush strokes of that lighter green wherever you feel like it should go. Just, I would still say, use a very little amount of paint. You want to dry brush it on versus using a whole bunch of paint and blobbing it on. Then I will get some darker green. So to the same green, if you still have dark green, you can just add that and make it darker, or add a bit of blue and yellow that will make it darker, but mostly blue. So basically just make slightly darker green. And with that green, you can go ahead and add a couple vertical brush strokes as well, just wherever. Just trying to create, and you can add as many of this light and dark shades as you want. So you can technically, if you have time and desire to do so, you can add like 10 different shades of green. And the more shades of green you add, the better it is for your grass. So add some warmer ones, some colder ones. Experiment with the shades of green that you add. Try to create all kinds of different shades of green, and just fill your grass in the same manner with different shades of green. Just keep going with vertical brush strokes, and don't add it evenly. That's another thing. Don't try to, have it evenly spread. You want to have a bit more dark in certain areas, a bit more light in certain areas. It's not about making it even. It's actually quite the opposite. Okay, so I did my second shade of green. Let's maybe do one more. Let's take a bit of yellow and add here maybe a smidge more red. We'll do like a burnt green. Do this one, like a green mix with, it looks like almost brownish green. We'll do a bit of that one too. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about just having as many shades of green as possible, and generally we're keeping everything here in more like a brown tones, brownish tones. Everything should have like this orangey, browny, burnt undertone. So I think that would be an appropriate color to add. Now I kind of want to make a bit of the lighter orange, peachy color. This is optional, you don't have to do if you don't want to, but I feel like I'm missing that. So I'm going to make that lighter cloud color. Do you remember the first one that we did? So something similar to that one. I think this one is quite similar to that one. I'm just going to flick a little bit of that in this section here. Again, dry brushing it on, so you see how little bit of paint I'm using. I'm not doing a full-on blob, so I'm using quite a small amount of paint. Dry brushing it on just so lightly. Maybe I'll add a smidge of that, some around here too. Alright, after this, I'm going to move to my black and onto my white. It doesn't really matter which one you start with. I think we're going to start with black because just why not? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my small brush, a little bit of my black paint, I'll water it down. Make sure it's nice and thin, nice and liquid. Now I'm going to add again the edge to my bar. I'm going to flick some couple of brush strokes down. I'm gonna add a little underline on this door, and then I'm gonna color in this top right corner by just flicking from the top down. See, color it in a bit. And then if you want to color in this part and just, add this line and maybe a couple of vertical line, not as many as in brown, but just a few to divide it to like woodwards, you can. I would say just don't overdo it. You don't want to have too many in black because you don't want to chop it all off, chop it all up in black. It's not necessary at all. Now, roof is optional. I'm going to keep my roof like this. I'm not going to touch it with black, but if you wanted to, you could. It's going to give it a bit more contrast. So I'm going to leave that up to you, whether you want to add it or not. Add another smidge right here. And then I'm going to add just a bit on my robe as well. So I'm going to start right here, just like, oh, too much black. A little highlight, I would say, just like to darken it up a touch there. On the other side, I'll just flick some from here, a little from the top. Then I'm going to grab my medium small brush, just a little bit of black as well, and I'm going to flick this up just a touch, darken it up. Let's smudge this a little bit more. This looks like a lot of black paint. This is better. A little more smudged. If you want, you could flick some in the middle, just like make sure it's smallest amount possible. And then I'm going to move to my fence, and I'm going to add a fence literally just out of black. So if you still see your lines, you can add them exactly where they were. In my case, I actually lost all my lines, oops, which is fine, not a problem. I can just freehand them on top. Again, there's no particular order in which they're supposed to go, so I would say decide where your opening is going to be and put vertical lines. Here's one vertical line, second vertical line. You could also do this in brown if you would like less contrast. That would be okay too. Vertical line, vertical line, vertical line. And then for the other side of the fence, so vertical line, we'll do next one here, and one here, and one right here. And now I just connect them with horizontal lines. So two lines, two, 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 two. Here I'm not going to connect them. I'm going to keep the gap. Connect this two, this two, this two. Right, now I'm going to take just a little bit of watered down black. I'm going to water it down, and I'm going to use just a very small touch. And I'm going to add some underneath, like a little shadow. You can do this in darker green too if you prefer less contrast. See, just like a little, tiny little smidge. Very small. Like a little shadow. You can do it and totally do it in dark green, and it's going to look less contrast, but still really good. So either or is fine. Doesn't have to be specifically black. And now I'm going to do some white. So I'm going to wash off my small brush, and I'm going to take some white on the side, water it down, so I can take just a tiny touch of it, make it more liquid so I can work with fine lines. Because I find that if your paint is too thick, no matter how good your brush is, it just um, get doesn't give you good fine lines. And I'm going to start with the roof, and I'm just going to add a bit of texture and a highlight on the design of the roof. You want to use as little of brush as possible, because you see you want to have those really super fine lines. You see, I did just a little highlight to enhance the design of my roof. Now I'm going to move on to the house itself, and I'm just going to highlight a couple spots on a house here. Like that, maybe I will add horizontal line to it here, and maybe I will highlight the door a little bit. Basically just adding a little highlights if you think would benefit little barn. Alright, then I'm gonna add highlights on my fence. And then I'm gonna add highlights on my roads and on my grass. So I think I'm gonna start with my grass. I'm gonna take again just a little bit of white on my small brush. I'm gonna dab it off on a paper towel so I'm not using too much. And I'm gonna add a little pieces of grass in white, but you see I'm dry brushing them on, so they're hardly visible because I'm hardly using any paint on my brush. And again, when I add a little too much, accidentally blob it on, or just don't realize how much paint I use, I can always smudge it just using my finger. But generally use as little bit of paint as possible. And dry brush, just dry brush it on. Alright, so now I'm going to add a specks of white. So I'm going to take a little bit more paint on my brush, and I'm just going to add like a white little dots. Assuming that those are just wild um, white flowers scattered all over this field. Maybe white daisies, maybe, any other white flower. Again, as you notice, I'm not evenly spreading them. I'm not doing, this is not my goal to have them evenly spread. I like having a bit more in certain areas, a bit less in others, because that's how it is in real nature. And a little bit on the other side too. Now I'm going to add some more white onto my road. So I'm just going to grab it on my medium small brush. Just a touch, and I'm going to dry brush it on. And guys, for me personally, this is actually it. There's nothing else that I would be adding to this painting. However, I would say don't stop until you love it. So take a good look at it and see if you feel like you're done. If not, there are options of what you could do. You could go back and work on your clouds. You wouldn't be able to work on all of them because certain clouds are covered by trees or by mountains potentially. But there are upper clouds that you can add a bit of lightness on top, like a bit more of that highlight on top, or you can add a bit of darkness in, because again, it doesn't have to go in every single cloud. You can work more on your button, you can add more design, so basically you can add more shades of this color and just flick them here um, under the same angle. You can add a bit more separation for the wood, or if you added too much separation, you can actually take that base color that we had and just color it in with that base color. You can add more shades of green or brown or copper or orange on our grass in vertical brushstrokes, or you can add more wild flowers by just honestly choosing any color. You can have in yellow, in red. As you know, wild flowers come in all colors possible. So just add a couple specks of whichever colors you choose and just keep going until you love it. And then whenever you love it, you stop and then you sign it. That's important. So just choose a good spot and put your name, your signature, or your initials, anything that you would like. I'm going to put my initials right here. And then if you haven't done your edges, maybe you have done them, but maybe you have not. If you haven't, you can do them now. And what I personally like to do is I like to just take black paint and color my edge with black. And what it does, it makes everything here pop because it kind of creates visually that black frame on your painting. So I wouldn't be painting it up front, just the edge itself. Alternatively, what you could do two options. As one, you can color match everything. So if that would require a lot of mixing, or if you use every color premix, that might be not too bad of an option. Or you can take one compatible color. So what I mean by that is one color currently present in your painting. So you have this lots of green, right? So you could use green. You could use light blue. You can use dark green. You can use the copper brown color. So just color that's present already, and color all the edges with that color. And what that will do is it will get rid of this messy and finished look edge, and that really helps with hanging your painting. It looks great like this, but also when you hang it, you're going to see it from every angle. So it's good to get rid of these edges and take care of them while we're still at the painting stage. So those will be just things I would recommend doing. Well, I hope you guys had fun painting with me, and if you would like to share your results with us, you're always welcome to post them anywhere on our Facebook page. So just under any post, in comments, or make your own post, whatever works for you. We would love to see them. But also, if you'd rather not, no pressure. Thanks again for joining me. Bye, everyone.